Yes. Okay. Let's get going. So thank you for joining us for year two, Orchards for Schools. It's been a ridiculously busy and incredible year. The last year we had something like 800 schools come on board with the programme, planting thousands of trees in orchards in their schools all across the UK, Scotland, Northern Ireland, England, Wales. And it's just been amazing, the response. Watching it all happen on our hashtag Force for Nature as well. So all part of our bigger campaign, Be a Force for Nature. I'm joined with the legendary Lewis. Lewis, like to say that?
Hello, nice to be with you all.
And Juliet as well. And Juliet?
Hiya, nice to see you all.
And yeah, we're going to take you through the next hour, giving you an insight into the Orchards for Schools programme, preparing and planning your projects and receiving your trees, which will be coming very soon from the 2nd of December, the part of the National Tree Planting Week this year that the Tree Council are running. So expect your trees to be arriving from those dates if you manage to get your order in early, and that will extend out all the way until March next year with I think we're looking to get about 1,100 schools on board this coming year, and it's close to something like 45,000 trees. So it's epic, and I'm so pleased that you could all make it today. What are the Tree Council? The Tree Council's been around for 50 years, and the last 30 years has been the Tree Wardens programme, which is volunteers, about 600 or so volunteers across the UK, helping schools and helping communities protect their trees. So if you're thinking about your projects, and Lewis is going to mention this towards the end, how you connect with your local communities, feed into experts that are local to you, and Tree Wardens is one network which will come really in handy in the coming years. Certainly it's been very helpful for schools, Orchards for Schools last year on the programme. So make sure that you do link up, go onto a Tree Council website to see where local tree wardens might be to support you with your projects. 7.5 million trees planted in the last few years, and the Tree Wardens give so much of their time, so just mention there. But the Tree Council, its core driver, if you like, is there's a critical partner for DEFRA. We set up tree health programs and toolkits like the OPM toolkit and ash dieback toolkit, which is decimating ash across the UK. So it's a very important component of what the Tree Council do. And of course, we go into schools and we educate and inspire children to make a difference and to become a force for nature as part of the Orchards for Schools programme and other programmes that we run, including the Young Tree Champion programme. We are not alone, and you can reach out to these other partners to support your school. And partners, of course, eco schools. I'm sure a lot of your schools are on the eco schools programme. We do find that probably about 50 or 60% of our schools are eco schools. And by doing your Orchards for Schools project, you'll definitely be able to tick your green flag project box if you need to, or bronze or silver. And I know that structure's changing. So I think it's just changed recently, Lee was telling me, from Eco Schools England. So yeah, we are tied in with that process of the Eco Schools programme awards scheme being evolved and being developed. So please reach out to Eco Schools and tick those boxes. It's a major benefit to you. Forest Schools, a new partner for us, and a number of the schools on the Orchards Schools programme are also have Forest Schools practitioners within your schools. So again, this is another great opportunity for you to reach out to them and gain some support. Learning Through Landscapes, brilliant, absolutely legendary organisation. And always willing to help and support. They ran pollination, and there's lots of schools across the UK part of that, but they are really brilliant advisors. Speakers Trust and Teach the Future as well. There's more. But really our main partner for this element of the programme is the Orchard Project, hence Lewis's involvement today. As mentioned earlier, the campaign Be a Force for Nature, look at that on #ForceForNature. That's where we ask schools to post when they receive their trees, anything you do really, outdoor learning activities that you might do. You might have joined the Young Tree Champion program and want to set up a club on that program and post on there too, and use the same hashtag. Yeah, these are the two main programs running with ours, and we now have an incredible 2,700 schools on board across those two programs, so it's really exciting. And why do we do it? Well, it's really about tackling the crisis, the nature and climate crisis, and young people across the UK have a real passion for that, and it's really important that we support them in finding the opportunities to give back and make a difference, connect to each other, connect to other schools, and help them improve their mental health. If it's been such a challenging year for schools, for teachers, so much stress through the pandemic. So to have the opportunity to do something positive and to reconnect, that's what this program is all about. And relieving some of that anxiety about the future that children, we often hear, and teachers share those moments with us when they're in schools, and the benefits that this program can bring. There's a knowledge gap as well, whereby children in schools don't necessarily know the roles of trees in terms of tackling the crisis. The ecosystem services that trees provide, and orchards as well. So we're really trying to fill that gap across all the curriculum, key stages 4, 3, 2 and 1, primary, secondary and special, and the care of the requirements of caring for trees and maintaining trees, that sense of responsibility that's so important to be instilled in children and young people as they become adults and inherit this planet and everything, all the wonder that's in it. So we're really keen to develop those skill sets and that sense of responsibility and care for trees and nature. And finally, to give young people the opportunity to speak up. It's run through this program, but it's also run through the campaign Be a Force for Nature and Young Tree Champions, opportunities to speak up for trees and nature and be a voice for tackling the crisis, which I know so many young people are willing and keen and able to do. Outline of this program, this webinar today: planning and planting on site, preparing your planting day. Lewis is going to gently take you through all of these key elements: planting your trees and hedgerows to give them the best start, how to engage the community with your project, growing and caring for your trees, and plan your year, and other resources and opportunities. So I'm now gonna, oh no, not quite yet. There's another sort of element here that Juliette's going to mention around last year's schools.
Yeah, so this is just an overview of what the year will look like for you. So you'll start off with planting and connecting with your trees, getting the students involved with that, of course, growing and learning. So it's really important. Your main task will be watering, to care for those trees and make sure that they survive and thrive. And then you'll get to share and care and enjoy the beauty of the trees. But now we will hand over to our expert, Lewis, who will tell you more about planning and planting.
Okay. Good afternoon, everybody. So yeah, I'm going to really run through the planting side of things and really getting you to think about where you're going to plant your trees, because that's where we need to be at right now, because we need to do a fair amount of preparation before the trees actually arrive in order to get trees in the right place, because trees don't like to be moved and they've not evolved to be moved. And the worst scenario is that you end up just panicking when they arrive and, you know, bung them in the ground somewhere, and then eventually a few years later you find that actually that wasn't the best position for them. They have to be moved, and then you end up with some very sad and probably dead trees. So the more planning you can do at this point, the better for everybody's sake, because this is a project of hope. And right now some of the themes that Richard just talked about in terms of, the climate anxiety that so many of our children are feeling, eco-anxiety. This is a recognized thing now. Psychologists are saying in the UK over 50% of them are coming across children that are actually really concerned, and rightly so, because we're in a really shocking situation. And there's many things that people turn to in times like this to say, oh well, yeah, you can do your recycling, or you could do this and this, and all of these actions and personal actions are important and they all build up. But there are a few things that are so sort of poignant and actually so effective, really, hopefully countering some of the worst impacts than planting trees, because of all the benefits they bring us, not least because of the carbon sequestration that they provide, but because of the shade they'll provide in our grounds and our playgrounds in hotter summers, because of the ability to take up water when we get more flooding and stuff. So actually, as a positive solution and something we can all do and get engaged in, that looks at a lot of these issues, tree planting is definitely where it's at. So well done for being a part of this. A little background on me: I've been lucky enough to be planting community orchards for my main work now for the last almost 12 years. And I also work with Learning Through Landscapes. I'm also accredited forest school leader. So I kind of combine all of these into the knowledge that I can share with you today. So just some basic stuff, really. When you're thinking about where to plant your trees, it's really, really crucial to find a site that is sunny enough, because in reality, we're not going to get much fruit generated from trees that are planted underneath a giant oak tree or a big old London plane tree or something. So we need to think about a site that's quite a sunny site. So, and what I will keep coming back to in this session is the importance of doing any planning and any part of this process with the children, because every part of this provides learning experiences, and having the children engaged from the start and through the planning process will actually give much more of a sense of ownership and get them more excited about it. So get them involved in all of this. So get them looking, thinking about which sites in the school grounds are the sunniest places. Where in the field do everyone go to in the summertime to enjoy a bit of sun? And also, we want to think about the site being a little bit sheltered. We don't want a really, really windy, exposed area, because the key problem with that is when the fruit trees produce blossom in the spring, but blossom might get damaged by winds if it's an exposed site, and the wind might deter pollinating insects from foraging around your fruit trees, and we don't have the pollinators, we don't get any fruit. So one thing to consider if you've got a very windy place, and that's the only place you can plant them, is thinking about planting some windbreaks, which will grow and provide some shelter for your trees as well. Soil, it's worth doing some very rudimentary soil tests on your ground, and you can find a lot of these online. So literally just doing a texture test, ribbon and ball, to see what kind of soil you have. Maybe try and dig down and see if you can dig easily for a couple of feet. There's nothing to no kind of obstructions down there, because we need a certain level of depth for our fruit tree roots, although it is worth bearing in mind that with the roots that these trees are going to come with, they can deal with a certain amount of rubbish and rubble in their semi-vigorous rootstock we're going to be using, and apples in particular are a little bit less fussy in their soil requirements than, for example, pears, which tend to prefer a more fertile soil. But yeah, we want to make sure there's no obstructions down there. We're looking for somewhere that's not going to be waterlogged. So again, drawing any knowledge you can about your site, getting grounds maintenance who's been working there for many seasons, get them to tell us where are the wet bits, where are the bits that are very cold in the winter, and draw in all of this knowledge and try and kind of like put this into some kind of a plan, some kind of a visual map, so we can start finding the best place. And last but not least, we need to have a source of water, because water is the single biggest limiting factor to successful tree establishment. And a shocking number of trees, newly planted trees, die within the first few months of summer. So actually you've got to make it easy for yourself. You have to do the watering in the first few years. And actually one of the great things about a orchard is generally it's a system that's quite low input for what you get back from it. It's not like when you're trying to grow lettuces and spinach and tomatoes every year where you have to raise it from the seed, you have to give it lots and lots of care and attention, look out for all these pests and diseases, and then you harvest it and then you start all over again. Once those tree roots are down and big enough, by and large, the trees will be able to look after themselves for water. But in the first few years after planting, we really have to help them. And really, one last point here, there should be another S, but I couldn't think of a word that began with S that would, kind of make this point. So I thought maybe scope for using the orchard as a teaching resource, scope for using the orchard. You might have a great spot if you're lucky enough to have a nice big school field and you're thinking, well, we'll plant the trees right at the end there because they've got all of these other benefits we just talked about. But really consider, if we're trying to get the children interacting with the trees, if we're trying to encourage our colleagues to take their teaching outside, which many teachers, are a little bit more uncomfortable with, that it's going to be less likely of a reality if you have to get your class right to the other side of the site first. So the closer to the school you can plant them, the better in terms of the trees being used, in terms of the trees being cared for. I'll give you an idea of the size of trees that you're ultimately going to have, because this is important because it's going to determine how close you plant the trees. And this is really crucial because we don't want a situation where you're planting too many trees too close together so that their roots are competing, so that their canopies are growing into each other. It's going to cause you lots and lots of work later. And actually, you'll have a horrible situation at some point where you have to decide which trees you have to remove, to kill, to allow the others to get the sufficient resources. So actually spacing is crucial. And you've got our little person here that's probably about around the 2 meter mark there in height, an adult. So if you look 2 trees to the right, the semi-vigorous, those are ultimately the rough size of the trees we're going to end with. Now, you might be thinking to yourselves, well, this is a school orchard. Why aren't we going for trees that are, going to be much smaller with this dwarfing characteristic? Well, the answer is, as the bigger we get on this spectrum, the more robust the trees are going to be, the more forgiving they're going to be in terms of soil, and after a few years, the more self-sufficient they're going to be because they've got a big enough root system to look after themselves. If we go down to the very dwarfing end of this spectrum, which might seem like a good idea because the children are going to be able to access the fruit a little bit more easily. Well, actually, these trees are so tiny and they're artificially stunted with a small root system, which means you have to treat them kind of like you'd have to treat a tomato plant in a way. You have to keep them permanently staked in their whole life. You have to water them all the time. You have to feed them all the time. But obviously in the summer months, when you have to do all this stuff, that's going to make it, not a low input system. It's going to be more work for us, more chance the trees are going to die. And the other benefits of these slightly larger trees, so we're talking here around, I'd say in most conditions, probably actually maybe around 3 to 4 meters in height and a similar width of canopy, is you'll get a proper tree that's going to be a great habitat for lots of wildlife, and it's going to live much, much longer. The more dwarfing you go, they're much shorter lived trees. You'd be lucky to get 10 or 12 years out of a little very dwarfing one. So that's why these are the chosen rootstocks. And actually just back on that point, so this means in reality, you're going to want ideally a minimum of 4 meters between each trunk when you plant. So that's something to go out there with your trundle wheels, with the tape measures, get the pupils out there, in any given area of land, working out, doing some maths and working out how many trees we can fit in that land. Other things you might consider is some vertical spaces. If you have sunny vertical spaces, you could use these old forms that the Victorians really popularized. So espaliers, 2-dimensional forms, cordons, things like that. Take a bit more work in terms of training, and you train them over several years of pruning, but not too technical, and can give a very nice effect of beautifying vertical spaces as well. And if you're not lucky enough to have much ground to actually plant directly into, you can get away with planting in containers, but the containers have to be large. So these ones about 1 meter by 1 meter, so 1 meter in height. And, you know, we need to make sure, obviously, trees they're not going to really be as productive and as happy in a container, because of course it's going to get hotter, it's going to evaporate. But, you know, with a little bit of care and attention, it can be done. But make sure you get those boxes built really robustly, built to last. If you've got any kind of, you know, parents or local companies nearby the school that might want to, you know, knock these up for, you know, kind of a cost price or whatever. So this is where you start looking wider in your local communities to try and get some things for free, some skills and some materials that we can draw in. And they need to be large enough, and thinking about a good loamy soil that's got a fair amount of clay content to hold on to the water, and they must be mulched, but we'll talk about the mulch in a little bit. So I've talked about proximity to classrooms. You know, it makes sense, really. Don't worry about getting too close to any buildings with these size trees, because these size rootstocks are not going to cause any subsidence. They're not going to cause any structural damage like that. School neighbours. So, okay, if we're talking about trees that might end up being around 3.5 meters, maybe even 4 meters with some more vigorous varieties, then we should really consider any neighbours, anyone looking out over that whose view might be obscured. Zones of activity. So if you're starting to do your plans, and again, get the children involved in drawing a plan, you could do it to scale with older year groups, or you could just do more of a visual thing. Scale's handy, obviously, because we can work out how many trees, but then you can get overlays of acetate, of tracing paper, and you can kind of zone things like activity and put on like, well, this is an area where a lot of ball games are played. So is this going to be wise to put the trees there? If we have to, then maybe that will influence how we have to guard the trees to protect them in their vulnerable stages before they're robust enough to be able to take a little bit of rough and tumble. Spacing, as I've mentioned, the more space you give between the trees, the more options we have in subsequent years if you wanted to add some additional plants around your trees. If, for example, you wanted to develop more of a forest garden type setup where you have multiple different plants, some that are attracting insects, beneficial insects, some that are actually potentially feeding our trees, so nitrogen fixing shrubs, some that give us a crop earlier to keep engagement up while we're waiting for the main crop. So things like soft fruit, berries, and things that we might get a crop within a year. So they're all going to need a bit of light. So actually, you know, long term, you might decide, if you've got the space, to give a little bit more space between trees. Shelter for all weather and outdoor learning. We want to get the pupils out there in all conditions, in all seasons, so they can experience the beauty of an orchard in all of those seasons, because there's something to see and gain from all of them. And thinking about the orchard as other things. What could we do there? Could the orchard be a part of forest schools? Could the orchard be a place where we have a little amphitheatre and actually we do storytelling? Or, you know, there's all kinds of ways that school orchards are being used to enrich the curriculum in other ways. And potentially even public access, because ideally in a community orchard, if possible, we can actually have some participation from our local, you know, a wider school community, and of course in specified times with supervision, etc. But this is going to come into its own during the summer months when we need to get those young trees cared for. So actually you might want to consider, you know, is there anywhere where there's a gate that would mean, you know, yeah, it just facilitates wider public access by consent. So really do think about this planning, and you don't have to get really technical. These drawings here are what we use at the Orchard Project, which is this amazing to scale 3D design kit, which we use, where it, you know, different tree sizes depending on the different rootstocks, and you get a scale plan done from a print shop of your area. So, you know, that's a way of getting things really down to a T. We don't need to go that technical, but as I say, it can be quite a nice exercise in planning and map creation and stuff with the pupils, if that's something that's going to benefit them. And it can create a nice visual thing that eventually goes up on the wall and gets the whole school excited about what's to come. So again, I said about gathering information, using overlays, and using this as a learning opportunity. Consultation, get everyone's input. So I've just been in schools the last few days, having children vote on which variety they want to plant. And I guess now for you, you've probably already you know, it's already determined which apple varieties you're getting, but you know, we could think about how the kitchen's going to use some of the cooking fruit, things like that, and you know, and other features we might add to the orchard. But we can open that up to the whole school and see what things we might want in there, like benches or making it more wildlife friendly, so bird boxes and things like that. So a little quick checklist for the actual planting day. So there's the planning for the actual site, but then there's the planning for the planting day, and really do use the planting day as a big splash moment, an exciting, really positive day where people are going to come together and plant these trees that are going to be hopefully providing habitat for biodiversity and fruit for many, many decades to come and many, many generations of children to come. So, you know, make a splash, get people invited, but you know, there's a practical side of it as well. So thinking about your class planting rota, how many pupils, how are you going to do it? You're going to do it class by class. How many children are going to be involved in planting each tree? You know, spacing out the trees earlier in the day to make sure the trees go in the right place. So once you've done your measuring out, you can stick maybe some garden canes in or use cones to show where the actual planting spots are, making sure you've got everything ready, because it can be quite hectic and excitable. So you need to make sure that everything's going to run nice and smoothly, of course. A little note on actually receiving your trees. They are going to be arriving, I believe, from around the 2nd of December. Did you say, Richard?
Yeah. Second
so
National Tree Week.
So make sure, first of all, that your school knows and that reception knows that these trees are arriving. That you're going to get these big boxes, and the trees are going to be coming bare rooted, which means their roots have been taken out of the ground, cut back a little bit, or the soil gently shaken off. And that means that when they're dormant, because they're deciduous trees, they can actually survive out of the ground for a few weeks in this state with the roots bagged up, if they are kept somewhere cool and not too hot, but also not too cold. We don't want them to freeze, okay? So you need to make sure that the school is ready to receive them. And whoever receives parcels like this needs to know that they need to go immediately into a cool, dark place where they can stay for sometimes up to about 2 weeks, maybe 3 at a push. However, you're better off, you know, getting them in the ground sooner than that if possible. If you're getting your trees early December and you can't plant for a while afterwards, then you need to consider somewhere where you can heal the trees in. And healing the trees in is essentially digging a trench somewhere in some ground in a sheltered place, and then kind of putting your trees' roots into the trench at an angle so they're not standing upright where they're going to get blown over. You can layer them all over each other as long as all the roots are covered, and they can stay like that until January and February, and then you can plant them, okay? But you do need to think about when they're going to go in the ground, where they're going to be stored in the meantime. So and not just have a situation where they turn up at the school, someone doesn't know what this box is, it ends up in a really overheated room somewhere, the project coordinator doesn't know where the trees are, and then 4 weeks later you realize these trees have been delivered and they're just parched somewhere and potentially dead. So getting people involved on the actual day. So there's a lot of opportunities here for all year groups really to be involved in this, from making nice labels. Once you know what varieties you're having, we can make nice labels in class beforehand to bring them out to put on the trees. We need to think about the actual planting process, staking, all kinds, you know, I mean, your teachers, you're great at this stuff. You know how to kind of like link everything to the curriculum. One thing I'm doing at the moment related to eco-anxiety is having the children write messages of hope so that they can actually bury those when the tree's been planted, or hang them on the trees once they've been planted. And thinking about, you know, like maybe some simple citizen science stuff you could do with this. Open laboratories, Opal, they do loads of free resources for schools that you could look at, and also follow-up activities. So maybe getting the pupils to write about this, doing instructional writing about how to plant a tree, the design and stuff, making bug refuges, all kinds of links while we're doing that. Once you unpack your trees, ready for planting on that morning, then give all of the roots a good old soak. Ideally, you can use those big flexible buckets for this. And ideally give them an hour or so, but whatever you can give them before the point of planting is going to be beneficial. You're looking for broken branches and stuff here that might have happened during them being delivered. So basically just give those a little trim, have some secateurs ready. And before we actually put the trees in the ground, you might also want to consider getting hold of some of this stuff. You can get this from most garden centres, and it's actually mycorrhizal fungi. So these amazing fungi that up to 95% of our plants depend upon for survival. And essentially these fungi attach to or penetrate into the roots of our plants, and they spread out into the soil, forming a secondary root system which forages for nutrients and micronutrients and water, brings that back to the host tree. So it can really, really get the trees off to the best start if you inoculate them and essentially give the roots a dip in this stuff. And basically you get to work with this beautiful looking paste. It'd be like wallpaper paste, and get the pupils to dunk the tree roots in there, and they'll love that. It looks like some kind of weird witch's brew. Then for the pits, so you might want to get some small spades for little people in here. You know, have a think about what spades you've got on site. If you're lacking in tools, you know, there are grants if you're quick, like small lottery small grants and stuff, but you might be able to get in really quickly to get some tools. Failing that, look at local groups, ask around, ask the parents to bring in tools on the day, because we don't need anything too specialist. So you've measured out your trees. Then we want to cut a square in the ground. Where did they go with that? Yeah, so a square pit like this. And ideally, we want to go to a good spade's depth or more and break that up. Break up any clay, soil, any other tools you've got to break up the bottom forks, break up the sides of the pit as well. We're going to try and facilitate when the roots grow up in the spring, them to be able to penetrate into the surrounding earth, and just break it up as much as you can. So I'd usually do like about 3 to 4 spade widths actually. The bigger you can make the square, the better. But then at the same time, you don't want to make too much work for yourselves, because it can be quite a lot of work. If you've got a compacted soil, heavy clay soil, then a larger pit is going to be beneficial. And yes, so we went back to this one, because actually it's important when you're digging that soil out, put it onto something that will help you retain it, because all of that soil is going back into the pit. So if you just dig that into the grass, it's really hard to get it back. So put that onto your mulch mat. We'll talk about that in a moment. So that could be some cardboard or a material mulch mat, because at this point, we're not going to fill this hole with compost or any really nutritional stuff, because that's one of those old horticultural practices we don't do anymore. We've realized that it's important for the tree to get used to the soil that it's put into, because actually if it wakes up and it's in this pit that's full of really, really good soil in the spring, and the roots then hit the edge of that pit and they find the soil out here actually is a bit rubbish, not much nutrients in there, they may as well just stay put and utilize all this resource. So it can slow down the establishment process. Whereas if we encourage them to spread out looking for food, and then eventually we can add nutritional compost and things from the top down, that's a much better way of speeding up establishment. Little picture here, but it's a nice picture. School I worked with many moons ago in right near Clapham Common, but at no, Clapham Junction actually. It's very, you know, urban school this, but they've got this amazing garden, and you know, it's great to have all this involvement, but actually perhaps there can be a case of too many little chefs spoiling the broth. And you know, here we've got a lot going on, and it's nice to have a child holding the tree where we keep it straight while we're backfilling. But also you might think about maximum numbers per tree, and I'd say really you don't really want more than 4 people working on planting one tree at a time, and they can do that in shifts, but maybe not all together, because it can get a little bit much. Our fruit trees are all made, they're grafted trees, which means you've got your variety here, which is taken from the branch of the variety you want to propagate, like an Egremont russet or a Slackmy-girdle, or all of these other weird and wonderful names that's great about planting heritage varieties and stuff. But then underneath is a root system that we're artificially grafting it onto, okay? And the important thing here is you can see on this picture there's a bulge where the two meet, and all this callus tissue tends to heal. Like if we break a bone, you find a bulge there for a long time afterwards, it's important that this stays above the ground. And actually, when you get your tree, you will notice a kind of a change of color or a certain moistness down here, which indicates the soil level of where the tree was before it was taken out of the ground at the nursery. So you're aiming for that kind of level, okay? So generally, that tends to be a good kind of like 10 to 15 centimeters above the ground. And you can have one of the children or somebody holding the tree at the right level while we measure that. So actually this diagram back here shows there's a cane going across there, and they're actually, they've got the tree at the right level there. You can see the graft union is just a little bit above there, and have someone holding that in place while you're putting the soil back in and underneath. And you can see here again, just that little notch just above the soil line, and Mary and Mare's holding it while it's being backfilled. Guarding, you're going to get some chicken wire, simple chicken wire guards with your trees. For most schools, this will probably be okay. If you have rabbits that come into your school, then actually the chicken wire should hopefully prevent them from nibbling the bark in the winter. If you're lucky enough to have random deer incursions or muntjac, things like that, then you're going to have to go for something a little bit more, you know, a bit larger and a bit stronger. If you get frequent incursions to your school by, you know, people who vandalize stuff, which does happen with a lot of schools, you know, people breaking in on the weekends and things, then you might want to go for something even more robust. And these are a bit, they look a bit much if you look at the size of the tree, a bit Fort Knox, but these are what we have to use when we're planting in public spaces in London, because trees go missing or they get damaged. And for the first few years, we start the trees off like this. So you might consider something a bit more, significant. And then once the tree's in the ground and the soil's being filled back in, we're putting a mulch mat on. So this is simply something to kill off any grass and any other kind of plants we don't want competing with our tree in the first few years. And the bigger you can make this, the better. You can get hold of loads of thick cardboard and layer it around. I'd say ideally you want a meter circle around each tree that's got this layer of cardboard on it. If you are using cardboard, make it nice and damp first before you put it down, and layer the edges over if you're using multiple sheets so that vigorous things like brambles can't grow in between the gaps. And then on top of that, we want a nice big pile of mulch. This is really, really vital. So many people plant trees and forget this bit, and it's such a simple thing to do. And it's really important because it keeps away any competition from other plants in the first few years. It acts like a lid on the soil and it keeps all that moisture in the ground, which is really important when we get in hotter, longer conditions during the summer. And it builds the soil as well and keeps everything nice and cool during these hotter periods. And this is simply just wood chip. So ideally from mainly broadleaf species. A little diagram here. So you want a good, ideally about sort of like at least 10 to 15 centimeters depth and about a meter wide circle around each tree. But do make sure that you're not pressing the wood chip up against the bark of the tree. So you want to create this kind of slight donut shape so the bark remains free and doesn't get rotted or any problems from the wood chip against it. And you can also see a stake here. So a simple stake, and the most simple way to stake a fruit tree is actually to do it kind of like horizontally like this, because that way there's less points of contact between the stake and the tree. If you have an upright stake, some of the lower branches might be rubbing against that. And you want to ideally stake your tree so that the tree is blowing away from the stake in the prevalent winds. So usually for the UK, that's a southwesterly wind. So you want your stake so that the trees are going to be blowing away from it. So they're not blowing into it, okay? I've just realized I've come to half an hour. How many slides have I got? Securing your and sorting your mulch. Ideally, you want lots of it. Ideally, you want to strike up a relationship with a local tree surgeon and get loads of this stuff delivered because it's great stuff. Have a big pile of it and you can keep on using it and it's free. And then I'm going to talk briefly about getting people involved. To advertise your planting day, this is a great focal point to get people involved. It's a great moment of celebration. It's a great time to involve people like your tree officers, any local tree wardens, any local council tree officers. any local council people you want to foster good relationships with, the neighbours of the school, any local wildlife organisations, any groups that maybe have access to an apple press that they could bring along, and you could press some fresh juice. So it's a great opportunity to make links, to bring people in, to get people, kind of give people some ownership of this project, and to think together about what the orchard might be in subsequent years. And at this point, it's really crucial to have your, get ready to take some email addresses to recruit people to do the watering, because it's really, really crucial from the spring, as soon as those buds burst, that you have a watering water rota in place. Essentially, you need 15 to 20 litres per tree, ideally, for the summer months, particularly in the first year. So, the more people that can do that during the summer months, the better. So the opening, that opening day is such a great engagement time for getting people involved, and get some mulled apple juice, make some nice apple pies to share, and really use it as a celebratory moment. I think that's me done for now. Anything you want to add to that, Juliet? Anything I missed out? Or?
I think you covered loads. We've got a few questions, if we can do some questions now, if that's all right.
Yeah.
Here we've got, we live in an area, from Michelle, we live in an area where it is heavy clay ground. What would you suggest to get around this? We use John Innes number 3 for plants and grit, which seems to help. Will this work for the trees?
Yeah, I mean, the thing is, you've got a bit more time, thankfully, with the trees to start breaking this soil up. So there's multiple ways you can deal with it. That kind of preparation is good to start off with. A lot of apple trees do actually quite like a clay soil. So obviously the benefits of the clay soil is it does hold on to nutrients and water. And there's some apple varieties that actually, favour a clay soil. But other things we can do is, adding this mulch, this wood chip, and continuing to do that over the years is going to start creating humus from the top down, as does in nature. It's going to draw in more worms that themselves are going to start breaking things up a little bit. But one thing you might consider is getting hold of some comfrey, some Bocking 14 comfrey. When I say Bocking 14 and not wild comfrey, because Bocking 14 is self-sterile, and that's BOCKING 14. And it's an incredible plant. Every organic garden should have some. But one of its benefits is it has this very deep tap root, which is really good at starting to break up soil. So over the years, if we're starting to plant things that are breaking that soil up, we're adding organic matter from the top. We've already done that preparation you talked about at the point of planting. Then hopefully we should start to kind of like break it up. And the other benefits of that comfrey is it's going to draw up nutrients into its leaves, and you can then use those leaves to make a liquid fertilizer, or just chop and drop into the mulch circle. So those are a couple of things we can do. We've got time because it's going to take a while for the trees to grow, but it's also worth bearing in mind that most of the trees on these rootstocks, their main feeder roots are actually going to be in the top 2 feet of soil. So as long as we're starting to kind of like, improve that layer, then, eventually they should be okay.
Brilliant, thanks, Lewis. And we've got one about if the trees are stored. So when they've arrived, if they're stored, do we need to keep them watered during this time before we plant them?
So it depends. If you're talking about if they're stored as they came from a nursery, bagged and boxed up for a couple of weeks, yes, you could, after a week or so, or when they arrive, give them a dunk, put them back into those bags, and then keep them somewhere cool. So that's one answer. The other, if you're talking about you getting them in early December, but you're not thinking really going to plant them until the end of January or February, then I was talking about healing them in. You can heal them in, you don't have to water them, because generally in the winter they're not taking water up, and generally in the winter there's enough moisture in the soil that keeps them happy and keeps them moist. So if you're healing them in, you don't have to water them now.
Great. And Mark's asking, can the hedgerows take wind better? I need a windbreak for some chickens we've just got at school.
Yes, some hedgerow species can take wind a bit better, and actually, yes, it's kind of like we don't have to worry so much about the hedgerow species blossoming, because their principal use isn't necessarily fruit, although they might fruit as a benefit, but more for wildlife. So yeah, that could be an option. Yeah, I mean, there are other faster growing things. So if you've got a wet site, obviously willows are faster growing, quite fast growing. And actually willow happens to make a very good single species wood chip mulch for apples, because the salicylic acid present in the willows has been shown to trigger the fruit tree's immune system, which helps trees deal with things like scab. Lots of interesting research going on at the University of Reading around this. So you could have a multifunctional windbreak that you actually coppice and use as mulch as well. But other things to consider are things like Eleagnus genus, so autumn olive, and sea buckthorn, because both of those are nitrogen fixers. They're very hardy. They're good windbreak species, and they both give a very nutritious fruit as well. So this idea of them being a multifunctional thing again, which can then benefit our trees through nutrients being shared by the mycorrhizal fungal networks.
I love that idea, and also the learning behind that, talking to the children about why you've got it and how it's a multifunction. Just very quickly, there's a lot of questions about recordings. Yes, we are recording the webinar, and we will be sharing the recording and the slides with you, so you'll have all of the information there, and it will be on the website as well. Somebody's asked, how tall will the trees be when they arrive, and how long until they're at their full height?
Good questions. Yeah. So when they arrive, generally 2-year-old bare-rooted trees are roughly around kind of 6 foot. Yeah. So that's the kind of height you'll expect the boxes by about 6 foot by about a foot wide boxes, something like that. And ultimate height. How long will it take? For MM106, I mean, it varies on the site, it varies on the variety, but usually by about sort of 10 years or so, you should expect them to be at their full height.
When they go in the ground, do we start watering straight away, or do we wait to water in the spring?
So yeah, when they go in the ground, it can benefit them to give them a little bit of a soak, just to help all of that soil fit into place, so there's no air pockets around the roots. So just give each one a little bit of a soak. You might have some of that root dip left if you're using the mycorrhizal fungi. You can add a bit of that water just to get loads of fungi down there. But then after that, you don't have to start watering until we see those buds start to break, which is usually around March time. So that's quite nice, having the pupils keeping an eye on the trees, going out and looking at that time of year to see when we start to see life emerge from the buds. That's your indication when to start, because the tree's waking up then.
What other question have we got?
Or how many trees? So Mr. Lynch may have missed a bit. So how many trees will arrive? There's 5 trees, a mixture of apple, pear, plum, cherry, species native, semi-vigorous. Yeah, 5 trees.
And Mark's up, sorry.
Yeah, I'm just going to say, Mark's asked, does this webinar cover hedgerows? Can we, yeah, Lewis, you want to sort of mention hedgerows a bit more?
It doesn't really cover hedgerows in any great detail. I mean, I think basically there will be instruction that comes with your hedgerow whips. Generally, they're a little bit easier in terms of planting, because you don't have to worry so much about getting the planting as right. You can just, there's various ways, but there's like doing a T-notch with your spade and plonking them in. With hedgerow whips, generally people plant lots and lots and lots, and there's always then a percentage that will die, and that's fine because there's plenty of them. But I think you will get information with your hedgerow whips in terms of spacing. There'll be a little booklet in there, and yeah, it's a bit more straightforward. Yeah,
so each pack will have 30 whips. You can order up to 2 packs of hedgerows. That's 60 whips. Whips are about 0.5 meter high, and the whips, to plant those whips, we're suggesting 1 pack will cover about 5 meters of hedgerows, so you could get about 10 meters of hedgerow with 60 whips if you plant them within a foot or so of each other. And as Lewis says, there'll be more information. The varieties, there's sloe, crabapple, hornbeam, hawthorn, mixed native varieties of tree, broadleaf tree in those hedgerow packs.
but they will definitely still benefit from being mulched like the trees, and they'll benefit from being watered as well.
Amanda's asking, if we don't have any wood chips, what else can we use as mulch?
Well, I mean, wood chips, you can usually find, like within any given area, there's usually a team of tree surgeons and arborists about, and often they're really happy to have somewhere where they can come and bring a load of wood chip, because sometimes they have to you know, drive to certain places to get rid of it. So do explore locally and see if there's any local tree surgeons that you can find, because it's one of those things that tends to be a lot of it around, especially in the winter when tree surgeons tend to be doing more work on deciduous trees. But other than that, I mean, you can just use like a bulky compost and stuff, but the problem is it doesn't tend to last as long. The beauty of wood chip is it actually will last for a good year or so, and it has this benefit of adding woody material to the soil, which encourages more fungi. And our trees, being species that have evolved in forest edge ecosystems, woodland ecosystems, they want a fungal soil. So that brings that benefit too. But you could use some bulky compost. You can use well-rotted manure and stuff, but I wouldn't necessarily recommend that in the early stages of your planting, because you'd start thinking about the more nutritional stuff like that once the trees have started to crop, and we need to actually replace the nutrients they're using during cropping. But if you overfeed young trees, it can result in a lot of vegetative growth at the expense of fruiting.
Yeah, and Ewan, that's a really great point. It is often for free. So Ewan says that his local council is providing wood chips for free. So yeah, have a look and find out. And yeah, great, Victoria. ArbTalk website. They can put you in contact with tree surgeons in your local area.
That's a great tip. I've never heard of that one. I'm going to have a look at that myself. Yeah, thank you.
So should we pause questions for a minute?
Yeah.
And over to you, Richard.
So with your tree packs, you're going to get a few resources. One of those is a planner. It's washable as well. So on the front side of the planner, you've got the Connect, Learn, Share framework, if you like, that we use for the Orchards for Schools program, helping those children, as you know, we both mentioned in terms of eco anxieties. But this is a great opportunity for them to connect with nature and to connect with each other when they're outdoors planting those trees. So do try as much as you can to get children involved in the planting side and the planning side of your projects. And then the growing, and then of course the sharing and caring, and we're going to touch on that as well in the next couple of slides. There's a few top tips in here which is useful, just about the growing side of things and making sure that your trees are well watered.
And on the back of that, there is a calendar. Now, this is, as Lewis said, just make a really big deal out of this project. It's an amazing thing that you're doing in your school with your students to be a force for nature. So put this calendar up on your eco board so that everyone can see it, and add the key dates. You know, let everybody know that this is when the trees are arriving. What are you doing around the trees? Are you having blossom picnics? Although your trees maybe won't have blossoms, but you know, it's a nice activity to do at the beginning of spring. Are you celebrating National Hedgerow Week? So just really make a big deal and advertise the incredible orchard or hedgerow that you are planting in your schools.
Yeah, definitely. And capturing the moment, make sure you do that too. We're really keen for you to share any photos that you've taken from the days. Use the hashtag Force for Nature. Send them in to us if you're concerned about consent and publicity side of things. So yeah, send us in the photos at our schools@Tree Council email. There was lots of other ideas there. I'll just hand back to Juliet.
Sorry, you can.
Yeah, interviews, audio recordings, capture the children's expressions when they receive the trees, live streaming, use YouTube if you can. Yeah, shout about it. COP's coming in just over a week or two. So, you know, this is a really exciting time for schools to show their impact, how they're making a difference in your school. So make sure that you link in and have a voice.
Yeah, and share that with local media, local radio, invite somebody, a local celebrity maybe, involve your local tree warden. When you get the slides, there's the link there to the tree warden, so you can find your local network if there is one near you. And just, yeah, make a really big deal out of the planting day. It's a really exciting start of your journey. And of course, share on social media, share your pictures. We love to see them. #ForceForNature.
And hang this on other programs that you are running in your school. The Orchard Project, all over the UK, there's a lot of work going on in London and Scotland and other places. There's Wildlife Fund, there's the Council for Learning Outside the Classroom, accreditation opportunities for them, there's Jane Goodall's initiatives, there's Eco Schools and Healthy Schools, and it goes on and on and on. And I know that you're very much interlinked as schools in lots of different initiatives that are running. So yeah, make sure you try and hang this on to maximize the benefit across your whole school. Got another webinar coming up in spring, so have no fear. We're going to help you. We're going to handhold all the way. So care and community webinar will be coming this spring. We're going to do a learning outside the classroom as well with learning through landscapes to give you more tools, resources, opportunities to embed your Orchards for Schools project into your curriculum and really shape and develop the skills of your children in school.
So other ways to be a force for nature. At the moment, the Tree Council are running our seed gathering season. So on the website, you can see some brilliant resources so that you can get involved with seed gathering with your students. And there are also some amazing videos explaining how to ID trees and collect tree seeds. So you can learn how to collect and grow your own trees from seeds. We also have a very exciting opportunity. So the Tree Council is working together with the Week Junior Science and Nature. And tomorrow we are launching a writing competition called Story in Nature. So we all know that nature is incredible, but it needs our help right now. So Story in Nature is a chance for your students to speak up and share their voice and speak up for nature too. They could get involved writing a poem about their favorite hedgerow or a story from the perspective of a tree. There's loads of different options. So the competition will be launching tomorrow. There'll be more information on our website, as well as a resource pack to help spark their creativity. The winner of each category will receive a year's free subscription to the Week Junior and Science and Nature, as well as some book vouchers and some books from the Tree Council. The 15 shortlisted entries and the winners will receive a certificate, and their story or whatever they write will be published in an ebook. So as I said, more details will be launched tomorrow on the website, so look out for that. And we also have a very exciting festival coming up. So on the 1st of November, there will be the Force for Nature Climate Festival, an amazing celebration of the Force for Nature campaign. We've got some brilliant activities. Renowned artist Rachel Gadsden will be leading an interactive art activity. We've got special guest Aidan Cronin, who is a member of the Scottish Young People's Forests. We'll be hearing from our ambassadors who will be inspiring you to take action and be a force for nature. And we'll also have the exclusive play of the Tree Council's Force for Nature COP26 message. So sign up for that now and register that. It's at 1 o'clock. It will be about an hour, and it's perfect for your school day and for your students. So we'll share the link there. It will be all on the PowerPoint that we'll share later.
Good luck.
Yeah, good luck. I think we'll hit 5:30.
Yeah, good luck to all of you, and thank you so much for coming. Yeah, we really appreciate all your questions as well. It helps us in feeding back and developing the program with you. We're working together with all the schools across the UK. So yeah, and if you find it already be an Orchards for School, then do get in touch with them, or if you think they might be interested, we still have something like 400 school places, if you like. So we're looking to target about 1,000 schools left to order packs with us. So yeah, do encourage other schools to get involved and apply. That would be fantastic. And have a lovely evening.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you, Lewis.
Thank you.
Cheers. Thank you.